Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this month for Side by Side Digital. I'm your host, Rebecca Shively. We've got a great program lined up today. This month, we're talking about negotiations. Now, no one likes feeling like they're leaving money on the table, but how do you know when a situation calls for negotiation? And how do you negotiate with confidence when it matters most for you and your operation? We've got a special guest on today to help us walk us through some of the best practices on when and how to negotiate. Jim Knuth is Senior Vice President of Business Development at Farm Credit Services of America. Jim has a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise on this topic, and we're really excited to have him with us today. Jim, thanks for being here with us today. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm very honored to be here today. Like Rebecca said, I have about 37 years of experience in the finance and banking industry, and I'm going to share a little wisdom and knowledge with you today. I've got about 25 minutes of content, so we'll do that first. So we'll have some good time for Q&A at the end, and we may even end up early, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll get started. Our topic is business negotiations. And I really have a four-part agenda today. The first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the big picture, why this is important for you and your operation. I'm going to talk about 8 business negotiation principles or fundamentals, those kinds of things that you want to do. I'm also going to go over 6 business negotiation pitfalls or those things that you want to avoid. And then I'll end up with some tips a little bit on business negotiation communications. So let's start with the big picture. Again, let's zoom out here a little bit. You know, when I talk to young producers, I tell them no generation has been better positioned for success than you. And that's really exciting. And I say that really for 3 principal reasons. For most of you, your parents sent you off to college, community college, a 4-year college, before you came back to the farm. So the fact is, you're the best educated generation we've ever had in agriculture. And I think partly because of this, you tend to be very business minded, very business astute. You're creative, you're innovative, you really have an edge for business. And lastly, technology. You're very comfortable with technology. And maybe let me give you some perspective on that. You know, when I was your age, there was no such thing as smartphones or the internet or laptops or Google. The fact was, I knew what my father and my grandfather told me, and I hoped it was true. But you've got the world at your fingertips, and that's really going to make all the difference for you. But I'm also going to challenge you here a little bit. You're going to have to raise the bar. In other words, if you only aspire to be a world-class producer, that's not going to be enough. In fact, that's going to be table stakes. That's going to be an equalizer, not a differentiator. That's going to be a given. And for you to really be successful during your business lifetime, you're really going to have to become an excellent business person too. In fact, we already see that in our portfolio from our customers. Those who are really thriving versus just surviving are those who really are working and improving their business skills and their business acumen. And then let's talk about the whole concept of the year 2050. We've all heard the predictions of world population and 9+ billion people to feed. You know, as I've gone through my career, and I'm 60 years old today, that's always been such a far off number, almost like a mirage in the desert. I just can never get to it. In fact, I'm not even sure I'll make it there. But if you do the math on your own lifetime, this is going to be your reality. It's all going to happen in your business lifetime. And so the fact is, your generation, you've got a world of opportunities ahead of you. And so the real key or the real question becomes really, How are you going to position yourself in your operations for the opportunities in the decades ahead? And again, like I already mentioned, one piece of that is to become an excellent business person. And again, business negotiations, this is one part of your journey on becoming better at being a business person. So again, let's get into business negotiations, and let's start off with those 8 principles, those 8 fundamentals, those things that you should do. And the first principle is take control. Take control. And when I say take control, I mean of just about everything you can. The location, maybe have it at your place, the time, the agenda, the priorities, and even the fact that there's going to be a negotiation. Again, by controlling the situation, you're going to be better able to decide what topics are discussed, what are the priorities, how is the negotiation going to go. You can also take control in more passive ways, a lot of it around communication. You can offer to summarize where things stand. Maybe you can restate the other party's position for understanding. But the bottom line, take control of as much of the negotiation as you can, because at the end of the day, the party that takes control, they generally have more control over how issues are eventually resolved. So principle number 2, share information. Again, this is a time for transparency. Transparency builds trust. You want to work toward win-win solutions. Again, if you want to hold your cards close to your vest, be very guarded, you're actually going to put the other person on the defensive. You're going to decrease trust. And again, here's the psychological point. People tend to follow the norm of reciprocity. In other words, they respond in kind to how you treat them. Negative to negative, closed off to closed off, open to open, positive to positive. Again, you want to share information, you want to be open. Sharing information, again, it builds trust. It starts to build longer-term productive business relationships. And hopefully, and maybe most importantly, it'll build your case. So principle number 3, use facts, not feelings. Again, this is your chance to frame up the issues, to get the important facts out on the table, right? Even prioritize them. Successful negotiators separate business from personal. They don't make things personal. They separate facts from feelings. And again, they stay calm. They stay poised. They don't let difficult personalities or maybe difficult styles drag down the negotiation. And lastly, they really avoid making personal language, using personal language, things like I believe, I think, in my opinion. So again, stick to statements of fact. So principle number 4, again, make the first offer. Make the first offer. Again, I understand this defies that basic conventional wisdom of, again, be a tough negotiator, don't tip your hand, hold your cards close. But the fact is, the research has shown that people who make the first offer tend to get better terms closer to their target price. Again, this is the psychological principle of anchoring. In other words, where's that first stake put in the ground? Where's that anchor at? Again, whatever that first number that's out on the table, the other party tends to typically start to work around it. It sets the stage. So again, successful negotiators try to make the first offer. So principle number 5, question rather than demand. Question rather than demand. You know, if the other party's taken a hard line on certain issues, taken a tough stance, sometimes the best way to approach that is to simply ask why. Why is that important to you? Maybe how did you arrive at that number? or maybe simply an open-ended question like, tell me more about that. Again, be careful not to just fall into that demand trap. Questions tend to open the discussion up. They tend to be more productive. Arguments and demands tend to close communication down. So again, successful negotiators, they question rather than demand. So principle number 6, if it's appropriate, if you can, think about breaking the negotiation into parts. Some negotiations break down because the parties take an all or nothing kind of stance, that you have to agree to all of the terms, all of the conditions to move forward. And again, a good way to avoid that roadblock is to break the negotiation into parts or even sections. Again, start with some of the easy ones. This way you can reach agreement. You can have a sense of moving forward, making progress. So another tactic for this, and it's one that I really like, is offer more than one solution or option. Offer more than one solution or option. In other words, would you like red or blue? Do you want large or extra large? Would you prefer cash rent or a flex lease? Again, when you offer more than one offer or solution, option or solution, you tend to start comparing and contrasting those options. Again, having dialogue, finding middle ground. Again, it's another sign of progress forward. So principle number 7, counter offers make both parties more satisfied. So here's the bottom line. Rarely accept the first offer. Rarely accept the first offer. The fact is, every buyer wants to feel like they got a good deal. Every seller wants to drive a hard bargain. And at the end, the reality is both parties are going to feel a little more satisfied if there's some give and take, some back and forth. And here's the other point. By making a counter offer, it also ensures that you're getting the best deal. Again, don't accept just the first offer. And the last one, principle number 8, know your target price, but also know your walkaway terms. Again, in a negotiation, parties usually know their target price, right, or what they're hoping to get. But the real key is to also know your range, or where you need to stop, or your walkaway point. And the fact is, if you don't know both, it can put you at a huge disadvantage, especially when you get into the heat of the moment, the emotion. Again, if you don't know your walkaway point and have a very clear idea about your limits, you will likely agree to terms or conditions that you're going to regret later. So again, these are the 8 basic principles and fundamentals of business negotiations. You know, I was thinking about these, and I've got a story of a young producer that I know. He was about 2 years out of college. He'd come home to farm with his dad. They had a good-sized grain operation. His dad gave him the task of contacting all of their landowners and trying to convert all of their cash rent agreements to a flex lease. So this producer, he invited all of the landowners one by one over to their operation, you know, time, agenda. He had made a 7-year scenario of what the differences would have been in terms of the cash rent or the flex lease proposal. So he certainly was sharing information. He obviously used facts, not feelings. Clearly, he made the first offer. He knew his target price and his walk away. Really broke the negotiation to some parts also. But at the end of the day, over the next 2 years, he was able to convert all but one of their cash rental agreements into a flex lease agreement. And if you understand what he did, he really followed a lot of these principles, basic fundamentals of business negotiations. So now let's kind of flip the coin. We talked again about what to do. Let's talk about what not to do, or some pitfalls. So pitfall number one, poor planning or no planning. Again, successful negotiators plan ahead. They do their homework, they're prepared, they know their priorities, their alternatives, their target price, their walk away. Again, this is not a time to wing it. If you're going to be in a serious business negotiation, do your homework. The old saying is true here: failing to plan is planning to fail. So pitfall number two, thinking the pie is fixed. Thinking the pie is fixed. The fact is, it's usually not. Again, this is part of the planning process, but you're going to have to look through the other person's eyes. Do you really understand what's important to them? Maybe their preferences, some alternatives, their bottom lines. Again, by focusing on only one aspect of the negotiation, and that's usually price, just price, you might be leaving other win-win alternatives or options on the table, such as, I'm a landowner, but I live 2 hours away, or maybe I live out of state, but my elderly mother still lives on the home place. And what's really important to me is that somebody goes and checks on her once a week, or maybe you mow her driveway or move the snow in the winter. Or maybe I'm a landowner and I'm very concerned about the quality of my ground conservation, and you offer to put in a buffer strip by the creek, or plant cover crops, or do no-till. So again, don't always think the pie is fixed, especially around price. There may be other options and alternatives to reach a deal. Pitfall number three, failing to frame up the issues. Again, don't start with just a number. Don't start by just throwing out a number. This can quickly lead to a take it or leave it situation. Framing up the issues is all about telling the why around your proposal, maybe why your offer is within industry standards, why your offer reflects current market conditions, why there maybe even needs to be a change in terms or price. Again, framing up the issues is telling the why. Again, putting a foundation under your offer or your deal. Again, failing to frame up the issues is a big mistake. So pitfall number four, watch out for anchors. Remember, we talked about anchors a little bit before. Anchors are where that first price is stuck in the ground. Again, there's always anchors and then adjustments from those anchors in any negotiation. The key is to just watch out for where they're set. So I'm going to do an example for the audience. This is kind of a participation. So everyone in the audience now, you're the seller of a house. Okay, so you're in the seller's shoes. You have a house for sale and you're going to list it for $500,000. A buyer comes along and offers you $375,000. Pretty low ball offer. And you decide to ignore it, to not even respond. A few days later, that same buyer comes back and offers you $425,000. So you respond with a counteroffer of $495,000. Then the buyer comes back and offers you $430,000 and complains, I've come up $55,000. So here's the question, what's your response? Think about that. Where were the anchors set? The fact is, you've both given in by $5,000. That first offer, the anchor wasn't set there. So again, watch out for where anchors get set in a business negotiation. So pitfall number five, caving in too quickly. This can be somewhat of an outcome of the first four pitfalls. You really didn't do your homework. You didn't do planning. You thought the pie was fixed just around price. You did not frame up the issues. You didn't watch out for the anchors. And guess what? You really have nowhere to stand. Maybe you've turned it into a take it or leave it situation. Again, Negotiations aren't always meant to be quick and easy. It's really great if they can be. But successful negotiators, they are comfortable with some time and some tension. Let me say that again. Successful negotiators are typically comfortable with some time and some tension. Again, ideally, you want the other party to respond to you, not the other way around. And pitfall number 6, and this seems kind of obvious, but it actually happens a lot. Don't gloat. If you reach a good deal and you're happy about it, and boy, you think that that's really going to work for you or your operation, don't gloat. Because again, all successful negotiators, the goal is to work toward win-win outcomes, not win-lose. Gloating doesn't make long-term productive relationships. In fact, gloating typically will only drive the other party to extract the difference sometime later. So we've talked a little bit about the business negotiation basics, in other words, what to do. We just talked about what not to do. So maybe let's just finish up with some communications on how to do it. In other words, how to do it. And it's really rooted in 4 simple communication concepts. Frankly, these are the same concepts that we teach our sales staff here at Farm Credit Services of America to help build relationships, work toward win-win solutions, and grow our business. Now, here's the key. Remember, the goal of any communication is to create understanding. Let me say that again. The goal of your business negotiation communications is to create understanding. And that understanding has to be through the eyes and the mind of the other party. So test yourself, really. What are you going to say? What are the words you're going to use? Do they meet these standards? Clear, concise, crisp, direct. Usually in business negotiations, less is more. Be very direct. Don't confuse the other party. And again, be calm, right? Negotiations can get heated, emotional. Keep your wits about you. Be calm. Think on your feet. This will always give you an advantage. And then be confident. Be confident about your offer. Be confident about your whys. Be confident about what you're saying. You know, people can really tend to read when you're not confident, and that can really undermine your position. And of course, the last one is be compelling. Be convincing that you are offering a fair offer, that you're working toward an agreement with the other party. And the last point I want to make again is that successful negotiators work toward win-win solutions, not win-lose. If you take the attitude that it's always I win, you lose, I'm going to take a hard line, I'm going to be a son of a gun, the fact is you're going to start to build a reputation. Build a reputation for better or worse in your community, in your county, in your area. And it's going to be all about what kind of a business person are you? Are you a straight shooter, fair dealer, work win-win? And that's going to open up a lot of relationships. Or the other side of that coin is, while you think you're being a tough negotiator, the fact is you might be closing down a lot of business relationships that will be important to you over a period of time. So again, business negotiations, they are an important part, one part of the puzzle of you working on your business skills, your business acumen, and becoming a better business person. So that's the end of the formal presentation here. I think we have time for Q&A, and we'll open it up, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Great, thanks, Jim. Really great stuff here, and probably a lot of good reminders. I think before we got started here, you were telling me kind of a recent negotiation that you had to deal with. Would you mind sharing with the audience kind of that recent story that you had?
Yeah, so my wife and I, we have a little place at Clear Lake, Iowa, and one of our water toys was a stand-up jet ski, and they're hard to ride. And so we had two kids that rode it quite a bit, and one moved to Florida and one's in South Dakota. And my wife and I are old enough, and we finally decided we're going to sell it. So we knew we didn't want to sell it retail, put in Facebook Marketplace and have people come and test drive it. So I went down to the local marina there where I have a relationship. And I walked in and the head salesperson was there, Jeremy, who I know well. And I just said, Jeremy, I'm looking to sell my jet ski, my stand-up jet ski. Is that something that you would buy? And he said, no, but we would do a consignment deal. And so I said, okay, well, how does that work? And he said, well, we would just set a price and then we would bring it in here and sell it for you. And whatever price that is, we'd give you that and we'd keep the rest. So right away, Jeremy, remember, he's a very good salesperson. He knows how to negotiate. So he's on his computer asking me, what's the year, what's the model, what's the engine, et cetera. He kind of looks up and he says, you know, Jim, we could do $6,000. Well, again, before I went in, I had done my homework. I was prepared. So I knew that I thought I could get about $6,500 out of it. That's what I was hoping on a wholesale manner. So when he made me that offer, I just kind of nodded my head and said, okay. And I kind of turned away. And my wife and I, we started looking at a couple other boats and she was looking at some clothing. And, you know, about 10 minutes later, while we were making our way to the door, Jeremy came out of his office and he said, what did you think about my offer? And I responded, I thought it was low. In other words, I kind of took the anchor out of the ground. Now, again, Jeremy's very good at negotiation. So instead of making me another offer, maybe he said, well, how about 68? And I was only thinking 62. He said, what are you thinking? So again, instead of just throwing a number out there, I framed up the issue. I shared some facts. I said, hey, ours is in very good condition. It's always been stored inside in the winter. We've got a very nice trailer, a custom cover, new battery, another set of keys. Jeremy, I was thinking $7,000. He thought for just a moment, and he said, Jim, we can do that. So it's an example of using some of these basics, understanding how to make a negotiation, and we reached a fair win-win. He's going to be able to sell that for a little bit more and make some money himself, and I don't have the hassle, and we made a business deal right there.
It's a great example. And I think it really echoes that point you made of, taking some time and leaning into, not having to respond right away. It's kind of classic, just saying, okay, and going and browsing around. It definitely kind of shifted the dynamic and made him think more about it.
Yeah, if you understand, I really kind of made him respond to me rather than the other way around. And so again, we were both kind of experienced at this business of negotiation, and we were able to make a deal fairly quickly.
Question for you, Jim. What's the best environment to negotiate a deal? Over the phone versus in person, their place, your place, neutral site? Any insights on kind of setting the environment in that way?
Yeah, I prefer to get face-to-face because you really can read body language and what have you. And again, I would also tell you your place to take control, or at worst a neutral place. That would be ideal. When you go to their place, sometimes they feel like they're very much in control. This is a little bit psychological, but again, I would do it face to face. So that way you have plenty of time for give and take. And if you get stuck somewhere, maybe you can start over. You can even do something like, Rebecca, I'd like us to start over, et cetera, or I'd like us to revisit this issue. Can you agree to that? So again, when you're face to face, you can do that. When it's over the phone, sometimes it's just a click and then you're done.
Another question through the chat here. How do you view the objection of I'll think about it?
Yeah, so again, when someone says, I'll think about it, what they're doing to you, you have to understand is they're going to be comfortable with some time and some tension. And so a lot of times you might respond to something like that is, I would like to make a decision by Friday. In other words, you give a deadline or some time when you're expecting a response from them. If you just leave it open-ended, you've kind of shifted all the power into their court. And again, this happens a lot, right? I'll think about it. And what you need to do is set parameters around that and understand that what they're doing back to you.
Yeah, great tip there. I know you mentioned a couple of those pitfalls when it comes to negotiations, but is there one that you see is really kind of the biggest mistake people make, or a really crucial one that, you know, will set you up to fail more so than some of the other ones?
I'd probably call out two of them, and the first one that really comes to mind is sharing information, but I'll really put that into the pitfall is failing to frame up the issue. A lot of times we just start with a number. And again, just like my example with stand-up jet ski, instead of, when he said, "What were you thinking?" I framed up the issue. I told him why my counter offer made sense. So failing to frame up the issue and really support your offer with a why. And then probably the second one is questions. Question rather than demand. I think when we get in a negotiation, we believe we always have to have an answer or a response to the other party. But sometimes our best response is to ask a question, to put it back in their court. Why is that important to you? How did you get that number? You know, one of the easiest questions is that your best offer? And let them respond. So I think those are a couple of the things that I would point out.
Great. Another question that we had come through, are there different kind of rules per se when it comes to negotiating with family members versus a business relationship, or do these principles translate no matter what?
You know, they actually translate no matter what. I think they probably translate even more in a family situation, because in a family situation, sometimes you make a lot of assumptions. You make an assumption that somehow you're going to do this at cost, or somehow you're not going to charge me for certain things, or I'm going to get priority of your time or your effort. And so I think that these really relate to a family situation as well as a non-family. I would also tell you, in a family situation, almost get things in writing, treat it like a business transaction, and that'll really avoid a lot of family disagreements or squabbles or misunderstandings that you don't want to have in a family dynamic. So treat a family business negotiation just like a regular one. And it's probably even more important to get it in writing and make sure that you agree on what's going to happen and what's not going to happen.
Yeah, really great advice. I could see that maybe feeling uncomfortable, but I think just trying to really keep it professional and keep it just like any other business negotiation, I think really great advice. Are there any scenarios in which you shouldn't negotiate, or negotiating is a bad idea, or ones that you should kind of stay away from? Like, I guess, especially in farming, are there any that are kind of no-goes?
Yeah, you know, sometimes the cost is the cost, and there's really not an opportunity to negotiate, and it is what it is. And by trying to negotiate every single thing, again, sometimes you get a reputation as, oh boy, here comes that guy again. And other times, someone will make you an offer that is just awfully fair. Now, again, you also heard me rarely accept the first offer. Sometimes you can just, again, say, is that your best deal? Or here's what I was thinking. And if it's very, very fair, your counter offer may be fairly minor. So again, you don't always negotiate everything, but certainly we understand that I'm buying, I'm selling, I'm negotiating. There's a lot of things that we would be very typical things that we do negotiate. I don't negotiate with my wife. She's always.
Sounds like solid words of wisdom to live by.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the pitfalls that you mentioned, if you do happen to get into one of those and maybe you start off on the wrong foot, or you make one of those mistakes, are there any kind of strategies for pivoting and bouncing back and being resilient in that negotiation? Or is it once you've gotten into a trap, there's no turning back?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's all about the style of your communication being clear and concise and direct. That if somehow this has gone down some avenue that you don't want it to, again, I mentioned a little earlier, is you really have to say, hey, Rebecca, I would like us to back up and revisit this issue. Can you agree to that? Because that's not really what you meant. And if he says no, then you can say, why not? Okay, I'm going to need to pull that stake out of the ground. I'm not going to agree to that. So again, it's all about being direct, but really what you want to do is propose, can we back up and revisit that? Because you may just simply said, we started talking about that number, but here's something I didn't understand. Here's something that I think will affect what we can agree to on that issue. So it's really about backing up, but getting the other party to also agree that we want to revisit that issue.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point about taking your time too. So not being afraid to call that time out or taking a moment or pivoting, just giving yourself that space to react in the moment. Looks like we had another one that came through the chat. This was a good one for you, Jim. How can I best negotiate in a lending situation?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on what you're negotiating. Again, are you just negotiating price or the interest rate, or are you negotiating collateral or terms, maybe the amortization, et cetera? I think it's all about making your business case about why what you're proposing is still a safe loan and a sound loan for the lender, and why it makes sense for both parties, or again, maybe why you need a 5-year loan instead of a 3-year loan for your cash flow. So again, it depends a little bit about what you're negotiating, but it's all about presenting, again, your business case using facts, not feelings, telling the why, framing it up, because your lender is also going to want to have, a win-win relationship with you, and they are going to recognize if this is an acceptable business risk for them too.
Nice. I really like keeping that win-win in mind. Win-win in mind. I think sometimes we're kind of conditioned to feel like one person has to be the winner, one person has to be the loser, but you really can come to that consensus and have a good outcome for all the parties involved.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions in negotiation, that it's going to be win-lose. I'm going to win and you're going to lose. And that's just not true. And in fact, that kind of stance will not serve you well, especially in the long run, like I was saying, with your reputation in your community and wanting to build business relationships and grow and prosper. Being the win-lose person will not serve you well in the long run.
Jim, if you want to leave us, I guess, if you had one more piece of advice, or to kind of our young and beginning audience, something that, that top 3% do really well, or something you want to leave the audience with, is there any kind of closing remarks you'd like to make?
Yeah, I save the communication style for last. I think a lot of people believe that the more I talk, the more convincing I am, or, it's quantity over quality. But I think that that's something that we can all practice and improve on, is be clear and concise and direct and short. You want short and sweet and direct and confident and calm. That's the one thing that I think a lot of people don't pay much attention to. And then when they do get in a negotiation, they ramble on and on, or they're not convincing, or they're not compelling. And it's really their communication style that undermines their negotiation. Maybe not the principles or the pitfalls. So don't forget your communication style in business negotiations.
Great. Well, we're just at our time, and I won't try to negotiate more time with you, Jim, even though I think I could now. But thank you, Jim, for being here and sharing your insights with us. Thank you, everyone in the audience. Some really great participation and questions. We definitely appreciate that. And we'll be back next month, the first Wednesday of the month. That'll be October 6th. And until then, we hope you take care, and we hope to see you online next month.